Fellas, with so many different heroes in Overwatch, some are bound to be harder than others. Today, we're going to discuss the 5 hardest characters to play in Overwatch 2. Kicking off number 5, we have the only support on this list in Zenyatta. Zenyatta is a very low mobility character. Zenyatta has extremely low movement speed and a lack of a disengage tool besides his kick, which makes him very vulnerable if the enemy team gets on top of him. Not to mention, to actually be useful with this character, you have to be able to hit your primary fire, as he deals some of the most damage as a support in the entire game. If you are not landing these shots, he can be extremely useless, providing low heals and a little bit of utility. Playing Zenyatta requires you to be very aware of your surroundings, making sure that the enemy team doesn't have any flank angles on you and getting on top of you. Zenyatta can require some more game knowledge than other characters because you have to be able to understand the threat ranges of different characters. On top of this, being able to position correctly around these threat ranges. And the last thing is his ultimate. You want to be able to use your ultimate in a well-timed fashion, not using it too early and wasting it, or not using it too late before your team is dead. Fellas, I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen Zenyatta's ult just being wasted, using it after the entire team has already died. Overall, Zenyatta requires players to have a good understanding of positioning, aim, ability management, and game sense to maximize his impact on the battlefield while mitigating his vulnerabilities. Mastering Zenyatta can be very rewarding, but it often takes time and practice due to how complex his gameplay can be. Now, this next one might be a little controversial. I put Wrecking Ball. While yes, Wrecking Ball can be pretty straightforward, to actually master this character requires a lot of skill and time into the character. Wrecking Ball has very complex movement like no other character in Overwatch. This requires you to be a master with their abilities to actually be useful. I'm sure everybody has had that ball one trick in their game that absolutely dominates the entire game, but most of the time the balls that you get on your team are completely useless. Wrecking Ball's kit allows them to do absolutely everything in the entire game. Engage, disengage, disrupt, maintain momentum, create space for their teammates. This is not to say that Wrecking Ball has a very high skill ceiling. Even though Wrecking Ball has 700 health, they can be one of the easiest characters to kill in the entire game because of how big the hitbox is. On top of this, to play Ball effectively, you have to be going in and out of the team fight and having immaculate timing. And in my opinion, to be good with Ball, you should probably use your microphone. And I know there's a lot of socially awkward kids that play Overwatch, so I don't think that you would probably get way more value out of playing a different characters such as Roadhog, Winston, something easier to play. Mastering Wrecking Ball involves a blend of mechanical skill, strategic understanding of how Overwatch works, and having a adaptable playstyle. While Wrecking Ball can be challenging to play, he can also create a lot of chaos and open up opportunities for your teammates. Now, I'm just going to preface these next 3 picks. Please just don't pick them in my game until you get to about diamond level, please. If you do, you'll significantly hurt your chances of winning games and actually climbing through the ranks. Now, the third one on the list, we have Tracer. Tracer is a highly mobile but highly fragile character. Requires precise aim and tracking to be effective, especially while she is blinking around the team fight. Having a low health pool ultimately requires you to be very evasive playing this character. Not to mention having good game sense to dodge incoming abilities and immaculate movement to dodge incoming enemy damage. If you're picking Tracer and just blinking in a straight line, not really using your crouch key or moving side to side, you're just going to be an easy target for the enemy team to kill. On top of this, if you burn your HP early, you're gonna have to burn your recall ability, which makes you less effective inside of a team fight and lowers your overall damage output. In my opinion, Tracer is probably one of the best designed characters in the entire game. Everything about her kit just makes sense, but it requires good ability management to understand what you're actually doing. Her ultimate is a pretty hard ability to use, as it's not guaranteed that you're gonna be able to pick somebody off with it every time you use it. I'm sure you've noticed, fellas, I've definitely whiffed a few ultimates in the background here. A big thing with Tracer is knowing flank routes with her and areas where players are less likely to be looking. On top of this, you want to be able to access the the backline, typically the supports in a team fight, before engaging the rest of the team. With all these things combined, Tracer is one of the hardest DPS characters to play in the entire game. Tracer's playstyle demands a high level of skill across multiple different aspects of play. This includes aiming, having good movement, ability management, decision making, and also your map awareness. To be effective with Tracer relies on the individual player's skill and the ability to create a disruptive and chaotic backline. Mastering this character often requires a lot of hours and a deep understanding of how she works, her mechanics, and playstyle you should be playing with her. The next most difficult character to play is definitely Genji. Again, please don't be picking this character unless you're in Diamond Elo. The only reason I say this is because it is actually very difficult to be effective with Genji unless you know what you're doing. Fellas, I'm sure we've all had it. You launch your game, that Genji insta-lock, and he does absolutely nothing all game. Just don't be that guy. If you actually want to win games, don't be picking Genji. So Genji has a very high skill ceiling. His primary and secondary fire is all projectiles, in combination of mobility from his wall climb, using your dash effectively, and also timing your deflect and ultimate to be effective. Oftentimes, if you use his ultimate too early, you're not going to get any kills with it, and you're just going to get focused down immediately. The way you want to use his ultimate is probably in the middle to later stages of the team fight. A good way to look at it is if the team fight had a percentage bar, the best area to use his ultimate is in between the 25% to 50% range of the team fight being complete. On top of Genji being very challenging and having a high skill cap, he doesn't have consistent damage from his primary fire. Additionally, he doesn't have a way to heal himself effectively without getting support from his teammates or using health packs. To be an effective Genji player, you have to adapt to the current playstyle of the game. Sometimes you're going to have diving team compositions with Winston and Tracer and things like that. Sometimes you're going to have to provide range support just using your primary fire and poking down the enemy, or acting as a flanker role on the enemy team supports. Mastering Genji requires a combination of exceptional mechanical skill, situational awareness, precise timing, and understanding of enemy movements and their abilities. How can I make a hardest heroes list and not include Widowmaker? Fellas, I'm going to be honest, I don't want to see this pick in my game ever. Not to mention, whenever you do have one on your team, you never see her pop up in the kill feed. Widowmaker, to be effective, requires her to be consistent with her sniper. If she is not consistent, she can be completely useless and almost irrelevant in the game. Especially at lower ranks, you will get much greater value out of playing somebody different. A character that's easier to play or provides more consistent damage output. Widowmaker is very susceptible to characters like Tracer, Genji, Winston, those type of characters that can dive her pretty easily. For some reason as well, Widow players have what I like to call the Widow mindset. Whenever there's a Widow on your team, there's always extra pressure for her to perform. And almost any other DPS in the game doesn't really face this pressure that Widow does, especially when they're hitting absolutely zero shots and their team asks them to swap, but they just refuse to. I think Widowmaker being the hardest character in the game to play, in my opinion, and not picking her kind of speaks for itself. Frankly, there's just so many other characters you could be playing and getting way better value out of. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on the hardest characters in Overwatch 2. Who would you replace out of this list, and who would you include? If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. My name is Halzeey, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.